Without further ado, let's welcome David Diskin for Camp Quest.
Thank you so much. Everybody, I'm so thrilled to be here, to be back here. I think I was in this same building, 2 years ago? You guys invited me to speak. Camp Quest has grown tremendously since then. And in many ways, thanks to your support. You guys gave some really great donations then. I appreciate every single one of them. And I'm really thrilled to be here to talk to you again, to some new faces about what Camp Quest West is, what we do, and how we do it, how we educate the future, to enjoy the great outdoors, to enjoy science, to be skeptics, and to have empathy for one another, to everyone else that's on this planet. Today I'm going to cover all those things and give you some facts and numbers as well, and maybe tug on your heart a little bit to help you understand more about what we do. And I like to start off with this letter that one of our campers wrote us. She was about 10 years old at the time. She mailed this in just a week after camp. And the whole letter is pretty touching, but the part that really got us was when she said that when she was at camp, she didn't feel judged once, which happens a lot even when she's at home and at school. Now, I have no idea what the context of that message is. I don't know why she's being judged. I don't know who's judging her. But I love that at least for a week, she could be at camp among friends who don't care about how she dresses or how much money her parents make or about what religion she is or isn't, about her sexuality, about her political views, about anything along those lines. She was there to have fun, to make friends, and she did. And at least for that a little bit amount of time, she could forget about whatever's going on at home, whatever grandma is telling her is wrong or a sin or that she's going to hell for, whatever it is that her teachers or her principal or her classmates are encouraging her to do or saying about her. At least for a week, she could be at camp and learn about the great outdoors and learn about science and make new friends that weren't going to judge her. And when I get a letter like this, that's how I know that we're doing the right thing. I mean, science is awesome, and the environment is great, love the earth, wouldn't be here without it. But for a kid to say something like this, to be able to go somewhere and just forget about the troubles that she's having at home, that's pretty great. And it doesn't hurt that when she signed this off, at the bottom of the letter she says, P.S., don't stop being awesome. And then we're like, yes, we did it. That's a great story, and that's something that we wanted to share. So that's kind of the background about what Camp Quest is. Yes, we are called the atheist version of Jesus Camp, although we really don't see ourselves that way. Most of the families that come to Camp Quest are non-religious. But like I was explaining earlier, we're not the brainwashing, you must believe in not God kind of camp. That's not what we do. We're not interested in that. We're not evangelizing for atheism. We're there to teach kids about empathy, to teach kids about the planet, the scientific method, critical thinking, peer review, all of that fun stuff, to make new friends, to challenge themselves, to break out of their shell, to try something new, like archery, swimming, hiking, try on some new clothes if they want to, make some new friends. That's what we're about. Now, some quick facts before we get into the real deal here. Camp Quest is meant for children who are between the ages of 8 and 17. All of our campers are there. All of our adults, of course, are 18 or over. We are what we call a sleepaway camp. And so parents drop their kids off on Sunday afternoon, pick them up on Saturday. They get the week off, and we get the kids. So let me give you a little bit about a day in the life of what we do at Camp Quest. We start off with the optional morning activity. So not a lot of kids take advantage of this. Most of them are still sleeping in, but at 6:15, kids can go for the optional hike. They can jump in the pool. They want to freeze their asses off. They can do yoga. I'm still asleep at this time, by the way. But we wake everyone up around 7 o'clock, and we get them dressed, brush their teeth. We do the typical, announcements, songs. How many of you guys went to camp? Raise your hand if you went to a camp of some kind. You know what I'm talking about. The cheesy songs about squirrels and dead moose and everything else and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. We have breakfast, and we don't do prayer, obviously, in front of the breakfast. But what we do instead is we have these free thought heroes, folks that are in some way part of the free thought community, not the average everyday ones that not the Sam Harris or the Richard Dawkins, but the people that the kids can relate to. Like, who knows who Daniel Radcliffe is? Yeah, he's an atheist. And it's cool for the kids to see that there are other people that they know, that they've seen in movies, that they've seen in TV shows, that they can relate to in some way and know that they are not alone just because they don't believe in a higher power. After that, we do a little cleanup of the cabins, and then we have our first outdoor activity, the team games. That's about an hour-long thing where we encourage the kids to work with other kids to solve puzzles in an athletic environment. This might be a subset of a game like tag or basketball or kickball, usually a team-inspired sport where communication is important, no one can show off. It's really just about building that. And then we go into the core of what Camp Quest is, what we call our free thought extravaganza. And when we're doing that, we've got these activities that are about an hour long that start off with maybe like a 4 to 5 minute introduction, and then 45 minutes of interactive learning, and then about a 10 to 15 minute discussion period. And this is the core of Camp Quest. This is our curriculum. And so these are activities that deal with science, astronomy, geology, biology, that deal with empathy and learning about the world around us, deal with teamwork, leadership, world religion in some cases, anything along those lines, social issues and so on. And I'll talk more about it, give you some examples in a few minutes. After that, assembly and lunch. Flat on bunk allows the kids a little bit of time to calm down, rest a little bit. They can read, they can listen to music, they can play games, cards. Then we have our electives, which the kids will pick an elective at the beginning of the week and stick with it throughout the week. And electives are things like photography, juggling, songwriting, acting, dance, map skills, cartography, that kind of stuff. So I did the photography one a couple times, and the first day we're just learning the basics of how to use a camera. Second day we're getting into aperture, shutter speed, lighting. Third day maybe we do like a photo hunt, like a treasure hunt kind of thing. Sometimes there's synergy with other groups, other electives. One year we had someone doing a newspaper elective or journalism elective, and then we did the photography, and at the end we kind of brought them together and assigned stories for the kids to write and a camera person to go out with a reporter. It was really fun. Free time is a long period in the afternoon where the kids can do anything they want within what we've got set up for them. That's where we have the archery, the swimming, the hiking, kayaking, where they might just hang out at the lodge and play board games. They might do arts and crafts for a while, and they're allowed to go and move around between these as much as they want. And go with their friends to this one, then go to that one. And I love this because just like everything else, it gives them a chance to try something new. When I was a kid, I'd never once tried a bow and arrow. I don't know, how many of you guys have actually fired a bow and arrow? Yeah, good. All right, took me a while to catch up. But I did when I was at Camp Quest. We have another assembly, another dinner. We do skits. You guys remember skits at camp? Weren't those the cheesiest things ever? But they were fun, right? And I got to tell you, the kids that come to Camp Quest, not only are they adorable and just fun as can be, they're also kind of nerdy. I will admit this. Their parents often are champions of science. And so we have 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds up there talking about Stephen Hawking in their skit, working it in. They'll do all kinds of stuff with Doctor Who or Star Trek, Star Wars. It's a blast. Another free thought extravaganza in the evening. Again, that's our core science and related curriculum. Evening activities, that can be the skidda course, we have carnival and a game night, we have a dance, astronomy, campfires, all that kind of stuff that you'd expect at any old regular camp. Lights out at 9:30, they probably go to bed around 10. Now the older kids, what we call our leadership track, our LTs, they're 15 and up, or 14-year-old, that's a little bit further along. They get to stay up a little bit longer. They have a similar schedule, but they also have a little bit more freedom. They have slightly different science and related activities, a little bit more elevated in what they're talking about, a little bit mature as well. For example, we talk about sexuality with the 15-year-olds, and we give them more responsibilities. They might be assisting us with other activities. They're allowed to stay up a little bit later, that kind of thing. All right, so let me show you some pictures about what camp is all about. I'll show you a map in just a second, but we are out there in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. Both campgrounds, our elevation is about 4,000 to 5,000 feet up, which is really nice if you're into astronomy, because that's going to help us see the stars as long as it's a clear night. And because we are so far away from civilization, there's not a lot of light pollution, which is really nice. And so we have a big open field at both of our campgrounds, and from there, on a clear night, you can see the stars quite well. We have campfire songs, we have archery, team games, music, counselors yelling at campers through their megaphone, that kind of stuff, swimming, more songs, skits, including LTs, dressed in drag, that's cool. Arts and crafts, astronomy. Liz is a public school teacher. She's a science teacher at a Davis Unified School District. And she's one of those people that you can take outside at night and point to any constellation, and she'll tell you exactly what it's called, what the stars are. She knows all those mnemonic things like, what is it, like Arc to Arcturus, and then what's the other one? I can't even remember it, but you know, those things where you like go and follow them around. Anyway, she knows all of that kind of stuff, and she gets out there with her green laser pointer and does the whole astronomy thing. We do board games, more team games. Of course, there's camp food. You guys all remember camp food, right? The camp food is actually pretty good. If you happen to be vegetarian, vegan, if you have celiac sensitivity, we're cool with that. We do everything that we can to make sure everyone can eat what they want to eat there. Karaoke. Occasionally we get some wildlife. This guy knocked over a bunch of trash cans after I took his picture. We don't have any bears. We might see the occasional garden snake or something like that, but it's a pretty safe place to be because the facilities that we use year-round almost are being used by other groups. Bears don't really like screaming kids, so they don't tend to come near the campground. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how we teach, what we do at Camp Quest, that core piece of what we do. And learning can be fun, all right? Not everybody always realizes that. Students are still trying to learn that, but often what this depends on is the teacher, right? Who the professor is, who the teacher is, who's trying to do the teaching. And the problem is that, you know, the way that we normally see classes run in our public schools, although this is starting to change, is if this pie chart represents time, that big giant slice, the kid is just listening to the teacher. And the interaction part, that blue, is minimal. And most of the time, that's what it is. I mean, you guys probably saw this when you were at school. The teacher is giving you facts and facts and facts, or you're reading and reading and reading, and very little do you get to interact, to try things out, to ask, to experiment. And so at Camp Quest, we've flipped that chart around. Like I mentioned earlier, we have like a 4-minute introduction, and then like a 45-minute activity, and in that activity, we're teaching, but we're doing it in an interactive way, and then after that, the campers discuss things amongst themselves, kind of like the way that you might see someone lead a discussion, a Socrates cafe kind of thing, if you will. And then when they go back to their cabin, they're encouraged to talk about it even more that evening among their peers, with the counselor just kind of pushing them forward. What did you think about that? What did you learn? How did that make you feel? And so there's a lot of ways to make an activity fun to learn. We could probably brainstorm in this room a dozen different things about evolution, or about empathy, or about geology, or astronomy. You guys have probably done some of these things. In fact, a real simple one, if we wanted to talk about how big the solar system is. Tell me if you've done this, where you start off right where I'm standing and you plant a flag on the ground, and this is the sun. Or you get a kid to stand here, and they hold up a big giant red ball, orange ball, and they're the sun. And then you tell another camper, another kid, to take one tiny step forward, and that's Mercury, right? And then you go about a half a step forward, and there's Venus. A little bit more is Earth. A little bit more is Mars. And so Mars is about here on the scale of the solar system that I'm creating. Who knows what comes next? Asteroid belt, good. And who knows about how far away the asteroid belt would be on this scale? Way about there. Yeah. And if we were to continue this on to Neptune, maybe Pluto. Do you know where Pluto would be if we did Pluto? I'm hearing like Sunnyvale, Lodi, Stockton. Yeah, pretty much, right? And these are interactive ways to help the kids understand the size of the universe, or the size of the solar system. We could do that with the history of the planet as well. We could do arts and crafts, where we encourage the kids with butcher paper, markers, to get and to draw things as they're learning. We did this one activity on the importance of environmental conservation. And we set it up like a doomsday scenario, because our theme for that year was zombies. And so we encouraged the kids, as as weird as this sounds, as much of a downer as this sounds, we encourage the kids to draw a doomsday scenario, a Armageddon, if you will, what life would look like if we didn't take care of this planet, right? And kids were able to come together in groups and draw, rising waters hitting our shores, animals that couldn't eat anymore because their climate had affected where they get their food, that kind of thing. And kids got it really quickly, how important it is to understand climate change as a reality and to do something about it. We can use arts and crafts. We can use music. We could probably give you something to think about, whatever the topic might be, and then challenge you to come up with a limerick or a poem, or maybe we all create a song together and each table takes a different verse. And then we sing it. And, it's funny, you guys have probably noticed that when you're trying to remember something, it's not always easy, but man, you guys remember the lyrics to every song that you loved back in high school, don't you? Right? When I hear a song that comes on, I'm like, I know those. How do I still know these words? I haven't heard the song in years or decades. So if you want to remember something, put it to music, right? And so we can use these kinds of things. We can use teamwork or competition to get people to learn and to take in the subject matter really well. We can use context as well. We can take any type of activity, and you'll see some examples, and just throw zombies or dinosaurs or Doctor Who on it, and it becomes very exciting for these kids. All right, so let's talk a little bit about that context a little more. Last year, or 2 years ago, our theme was the philosophical phoenix versus zombie logic. All right? Now let your brain digest that for a second. You've got the philosophical phoenix who thinks carefully about things, doesn't make any rash decisions, maybe is more independent. Or do you want to be a zombie? Do you want to have that sheep mentality that just does what everyone else does, whose only driving factor is brains and the next meal, right? Obviously, you want to be the philosophical phoenix here. And our activities were based around this theme. We actually taught 8-year-olds about logical fallacies with a game that we made up called Zombo, which is basically bingo, but instead of B2 or N17 or whatever it was ad hominem and straw man argument. Now, of course, with the 8-year-olds, we didn't use the real Latin names for these. We made them up and kind of taught about them in the same way. So, for example, everyone's got their bingo card, or their Zombo card, and we held up an advertisement that was in a popular magazine. And that advertisement had a celebrity pushing a particular product. Now, who knows what that's called, by the way? Which logical fallacy is that? Appeal to authority. That's fantastic. And if you had that on your bingo card, Zombo card, you could mark it off, right? And again, drawing back to our theme, do you want to be a zombie who just falls for the appeal to authority, or do you want to be a philosophical phoenix and think things through? So this allowed us to talk about the concepts of logical fallacies in the context of the silly, cheesy zombie theme, right? You follow that? So that's a little bit of what we do. And here's another example. We encourage kids to present, to talk to their peers. Now, I know that happens like every once in a while in school, right? But everybody always fears it. Public speaking is like the number one thing people don't want to do. And at camp, you're just doing that. You're doing that a lot because we want kids to be confident in their delivery and to have that notion that they can go in front of their peers and talk. And it's not a big built-up thing. It's just everyone's doing it. You're going to talk about what you learned today in front of your peers in some fashion. We do your traditional science-y kind of stuff. In this activity behind me, the counselor is explaining how the ancient Egyptians were able to build perfectly straight pyramids without any of the modern technology that we have. Turns out, and I didn't know this until I saw the activity, that they use water and gravity to make that happen. Because water is always flat, and so you just build on top of that in some fashion, or along that line, you can build pretty much anything flat. And so we were able to demonstrate, no matter what happens to the sand in this box, the water is always going to be flat. We blow things up, we mix chemicals together, all that kind of fun stuff as well. Some of you may recognize, this is Ross Blotcher from the podcast Oh No, Ross and Carrie. Really great guy, one of our counselors and board members for a while. This is Richard Wade. He's one of these awesome people. I wish I had his energy that can get in front of a group of kids of 50, 60, 100 like we had last year and talk about dinosaurs for an hour straight and have them captivated every second. He can, just like Bill Nye the Science Guy, he can, just be silly and goofy and serious. He's got all these really cool props. He'll roar like a dinosaur and stomp around on the stage and have kids come up and do things interactive. He's awesome. His parents were docents at a museum down in Southern California near the La Brea Tar Pits. And as a kid, he would go to that museum all the time. And so he developed a love for that, and is real big down there in LA in the skeptic community. We dress up, we have fun. In this activity, we taught kids that you can't trust everything that adults say. So we lied to the kids. We had them put a magic penny on their forehead with a bandana. Half the kids. We took half the kids. They all had magic pennies or nickels on their forehead with a bandana, and this half didn't. And then we did some ESP testing, extrasensory perception, right? And we had them predict what was going to come up, and people writing down how well Team A did against Team B. And turns out by the end of the activity, Team A did like 3 times better than Team B. Apparently, magic pennies are a thing. Now, it didn't take the kids very long to figure out that the people collecting the data were just lying their asses off and recording fake data. But that was an important lesson for people to understand. Because what happened to the whole vaccine movement about 10 years ago? We all got lied to by a doctor who said that vaccines cause autism. And it went way too long before that got fact-checked. And then all of a sudden we have supermodels telling us not to vaccinate our kids. A huge disaster. And so we want to make sure that the kids know that sometimes, for whatever reasons, adults will lie, they will fudge their data, and how important it is for you as a kid or anyone to go back and do the experiment yourself. And that's what we had them do. All right, we're going to step back, you're going to do the experiment, and let's see if you get the same results that we do, which is part of the scientific process. But it's not just about science at Camp Quest, we also encourage activism. In this activity, we had the kids stage a fake protest, a demonstration. And we didn't care what issue they were protesting. This wasn't about Trump versus Hillary or Bernie. This wasn't about atheism or abortion or anything serious. This is about should we kick out Justin Bieber and ban broccoli from the high school cafeteria. Okay, real serious issues. The kids, for probably the first time in their life, got to stage a protest. They got to make shirts. No, Justin Bieber, broccoli is bad, or broccoli is good. They got to make bumper stickers and come up with slogans. They got to make those signs with the, call them pitchforks, you know what I'm talking about, the signs that you see there. And then yell at each other. It was a blast. And these kids, because of that, I feel like we planted the seed now that if they have an issue that they want to take up, they now feel a little bit more empowered to do that. We don't want these kids to grow up thinking that they always have to just take it as it is. You know, if their teacher tells them that they have to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, now maybe they feel like they can stand up for themselves. If they're being bullied, if grandma is telling them you have to go to church or you're going to hell, maybe this helps them stand up a little bit more for themselves. And it's not just about that, it's also about empathy. We want kids to know that the world is not always a fair place and that there are people that suffer and people that don't. And so in the activity behind me, the girl is wearing goggles to simulate a 90% vision impairment. And then she's asked to put together a jigsaw puzzle or to gift wrap a present. And this was one of the most touching activities we had ever done at camp ever. Because normally we focus on the science, we focus on things like that. And for one of the first times we did this empathy one, it was so powerful watching these kids struggle, even just for 20 minutes, to feel what it's like to be someone who's differently abled. And our counselors were told in their script that after the kid struggles for a few minutes, to go up and offer them help. And you know what the kids did? Does anyone have anybody who's differently abled? What did they do? Rejected the help. And the kids said, no, I don't want help. I want to do this myself. I can do it. Which, if you've ever had a disability, people are offering to help you all the time, and sometimes you just want to do it yourself. And these kids learned that firsthand. After this, we sat everybody down and we had our discussion for about 5 or 10 minutes. It came out that some of the campers do have family that's differently abled, how it feels to be that person. Some of our counselors were sharing that as well, their brother, their sister, their sons and daughters. Tears were shed that day, and it was an amazing experience for everyone involved. It's not just about science. Although occasionally, the Flying Spaghetti Monster does make an appearance. So, let's go over camp in terms of numbers and a little bit of the facts behind what we do. Camp Quest is not just here in California. We've got over a dozen locations throughout the United States. I'll show you the 2 in California in just a second, but you can see they are pretty well spread out. It started over on the East Coast near Kentucky, of all places. Probably needed pretty well there, and has spread. This will be our 21st summer with Camp Quest. There's also 2 locations in the UK that are loosely affiliated with us. And if you add up all the United States Camp Quest registrations for last summer, 2015, there were over 1,000 campers nationwide. Now in California, these are the numbers for our northern and southern facilities combined. You can see that we started off This will be our 11th year doing this. We started off really small, like all programs do. And last year, you can see that we had 209 campers. It was 105 in one and 104 in the other. And you're probably looking at the little flame 3 years in. We learned a lesson. There was a fire at our campground 2 days before we were supposed to show up. And we had to call off camp. It wasn't our fault. We weren't even there. But the CAL FIRE said the air is too poor. You can't be here. And so we had to tell, at that time, about 30 different families, we're sorry. What we learned out of this was to always have a backup plan. Turns out there's event insurance that we now have, that if something like this happens again, our insurance covers us literally moving the entire camp somewhere else at last minute. Whatever it costs, the insurance covers it. We also implemented an emergency notification system via text, so that if something does happen during camp or right before or right after, within about 4 clicks, we can log in. We've pre-programmed every single parent's cell phone and their emergency notification counterparts into the system, and we can send out texts to, in this case, 200 or 300 people in a matter of seconds. We used that system last summer when our Southern California camp also had a fire right before we started camp. You guys may remember big giant fires on Highway 15 near Palmdale right around this time last year. For a while, it was looking like we weren't going to have camp, but it rained and the fires were put out, but the roads were still closed and muddy, and so we had to use that system to say, camp is on, but you're going to need to take the 15, not the 4. And it worked. So we're really glad that that happened so early in our life to teach us how important it is to have backup plans, emergency notification, and so on. Now, for the last couple years, this year included, we've grown 20% every year. We're looking to have 250 campers this summer. 250. All right. Now, our camp in Northern California is right up there. Oops, right up there. That's Nevada City. If you guys have been there, you may know about Malakoff-Diggins National Park, and that's where our camp is located. It's run by the Lions Club. Some of you have probably worked with the Lions before. They have local affiliates all throughout the country, the world. And so they own the camp. We lease it from them for a month or for a week, and now 2 weeks, and have a great time. So if you were to drive, and that's not as the crow flies, that's the actual drive, it's about 3 hours from here. Our Southern California camp is in a little tiny ski city called Wrightwood. And so if you are into skiing, you were probably there for the winter. During the summer, it's great for campground, for its campgrounds. So it's a 7-day camp. I mentioned that earlier. 205 campers. I think it's a 209. 209 campers, up from 174. Our ratio of adults to children, 3.1 per adult. I don't usually get too political when I talk about Camp Quest, but I always want to point this one out. You and I are often dealing with the separation of church and state, and one of those issues that comes up all the time is religious exemption, right? Any religious organization that provides child care of any kind in California and in most states, they have a very different requirement than secular child care. My sister was a child care provider for the longest time. She recently retired. And as a regular child care, not an atheist one, just a not religious child care, state of California says that you can only have 6 kids per every 1 adult, unless you're a religious organization. If you're a church daycare, if you're a Christian daycare, if you're a Christian camp, anything along those lines, and not just Christian, but any religion, that exemption goes away. Now, of course, we beat that by double, but it's important to recognize that even in California, and of course throughout the country, there are religious exemptions that threaten the safety of our children just because someone says, I'm Christian and I want to run a camp this way. And it's not uncommon to look at the news, and you guys probably see it on Patheos, Friendly Atheist, and Facebook and other places where things go wrong because of this, because there wasn't the supervision, because they weren't getting vaccinated, and so on. All right, I'm off that soapbox. Let's go to ethnicity. Now, here's where I say look around the room. The atheist movement, no matter what city I do this in, is very, very white and very, very male. It's not necessarily anyone's fault, but it is that way. At Camp Quest, I'm very proud that our children are 1/3 not white. And that number is changing and getting more and more not white. In other words, we are bringing more people, more children, into the secular movement, providing a place for them. We're also showing that the future of secularism is not limited to just Caucasian males. And so we have a pretty good breakdown of ethnicities, and we are seeing that get even better, more diverse. In terms of men and women, or boys and girls, I should say, straight down the line. Now, part of this is by design because of the way we split up the cabins. But I am really thrilled that we have every year that many boys to that many girls, and our board, our counselors, it's almost the exact same line. In fact, Camp Quest at the national level has 3 employees, all 3 are women. And on the board, it's pretty much 50-50. Now, in terms of expenses, if you're curious where our money goes, this is the chart. In fact, back at my table, I have our annual report back there. You're welcome to have one, which lists very down to the detail. Turns out it takes a lot of money to feed 300 people for 1 week. 87% of every dollar that we take in, whether it be a donation or registration fees, goes to our program. That is food, sleeping, supplies, safety, and so on. The bottom 4 bars there are everything else. And the administration, that green bar that you see there, it's not an employee. It's not me treating myself to lavish dinners. That green bar is insurance at about $4,000 for 3 weeks. And then PayPal credit card processing fees, which I'm sure you guys deal with here as well. We don't spend a lot of money on marketing. We don't spend a lot of money on fundraising. In fact, the only money we do on fundraising is print those annual reports. On marketing, we spend a little bit of money on conferences, on Facebook ads, but 87% goes towards supporting the program itself. And as a nonprofit, we're not bringing in and keeping the money. We give it back to the families that cannot afford to go to camp. And so you can see our expenses versus our income. It's almost a straight line down. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about what I mean by giving it back in terms of this campership or financial aid. Last summer, 2015, we granted $12,000 to families who asked for financial aid to send their children to our camp. $12,000, effectively a discount on registration. And on top of that, another $10,000 on just what we call a subsidy, which is an immediate discount for parents who don't want to pay the full price, but they don't want to apply for financial aid. And so overall, that's roughly half of our camperships, of our population. Our total revenue was somewhere like $150,000. Over $20,000 of that was given away to the families who asked for a discount of one kind or another. And every dollar that we gave away was from donations. We did get a grant from Edison, the Southern California Power Company, but everything else was donations from individual people, a couple businesses, and groups who've done fundraising for us. Now, we've done a lot in the last year. Last year, we were accredited by the American Camp Association. They are the big, giant body that has this binder this thick, and I'm not exaggerating, of safety procedures and protocols for camps. And we went through that binder and had to go through and document everything that we do, and then prove that to an accreditation team who came and checked out both of our campgrounds last year. People with clipboards going through every single thing. Every time our doctor hands out medication, it gets logged. Every time a kid scrapes his knee, it gets logged. 2 times a day, the pool gets tested for chlorine and temperature. 3 times a day, the refrigerator gets tested for temperature and nasty stuff. Every time I get in the car to drive a child somewhere, I have to check the horn, the rear view mirror, the signals, and the thread on the tire, and a few other things. And of course, I have to bring, just in case, a safety kit, which has first aid, booster seats. I have to have a little string that measures how tall the kid is to see if they're required to be in the booster seat. And every single one of our staff is required to know these procedures, just in case. That's how safe we are. We take this pretty seriously. We had a really cool fundraiser last year. We partner with organizations like the American Humanist Association, Sunday Assembly, provide childcare on occasion. LA Times came by and did a really cool profile on us last summer. And finally, starting in February, we hired our first part-time and our only employee. Her name's Jenny. She lives in Salida, near Modesto. And we finally have something to put on that chart back here that actually is an employee. So she's making $18 an hour. She's going to cost us about $10,000. And she is doing registration, volunteer recruitment, and follow-up and training, which frees our board members, who are all volunteers, to come to San Jose and spread the word about what Camp Quest is. We also opened up a 3rd session, also in Nevada City, because last year we filled up the venue. We had 109 kids or whatever it was, 104 kids. Every single bed was filled, and so this year we split that into 2 separate weeks. And they're both filled up at 64 kids per week, plus all the counselors. So let's talk about the future a little bit. Where are we going as Camp Quest? Where is secularism going slightly because of Camp Quest? And so we have goals. My goal as president of Camp Quest West is to, this year, work on the development and the maturity of our board. Nearly everybody on our board is there because they were an awesome counselor. They did a really great job with curriculum. And we said, you know what, you're so awesome, we want you on the board. What we don't have on the board are people that are trained in certain things like legal issues and accounting and so on. And so one of the things that we're looking to do is to keep that enthusiasm, but then also extend our board and develop those people who are, in many cases, college students, and this is their first time ever serving on a board, to give them the development that they need to become really awesome board members, to go out and do fundraising, to talk to the media, to lead efficient meetings, and to do accountability and so on. And then just like we've done every year for the past 3 or 4 years, to grow 20% in registration. Now our goal for 2018 is to extend ourselves into Santa Cruz, which I think probably excites you guys. And so we're looking for, at this moment, a venue in the Santa Cruz area. Right now, they all seem to be reserved for like the next decade, but we're hoping to find one. If any of you guys know of a really cool campground near or in Santa Cruz, please tell me. And if we can reserve it for the summer of 2018 for 1 week, we will do that. But you can see our numbers, our growth there. And so we are looking in 2015, 16, 17, in just a couple years, if things are going the way we expect them to have almost 400 campers. And this is just California. Nationwide, Camp Quest as a whole has a goal of reaching 2,000 campers by the year 2020. We have a secondary goal of being within a half-day's drive of every major city in the United States. So if you live in Florida, we want to have a camp 6 hours away. And in a lot of cities, we're covered. California, we're pretty much covered, unless you live maybe like up in the top, like in Jefferson or something like that. But otherwise, we're pretty good. If you live in Nevada right now, like if you live in Vegas, you can almost make it to our Southern California camp in 6 hours. But we have so many people who do live in Vegas, that'll probably be our 2020 expansion. So we have a lot of growth to do. Now, in terms of the overall movement, what I love seeing is that campers can and do become members of the Secular Student Alliance when they get to college or high school. After that, we love it when they come back to Camp Quest as counselors and board members. And although it hasn't happened yet, I'm sure it soon will, because we are only 20 years old. I would love to see the next Dan Barker or Annie Laurie Gaylor, or the next, I don't know, Greg Epstein or Richard Dawkins or Noel from the Foundation Beyond Belief. I would love to see them be, just as a little byline in their bio, camper at Camp Quest 20 years ago. And I'm sure it's going to happen soon. We've accomplished the first three. I know many, many members of the Secular Student Alliance and many employees of SSA down in Ohio that have been campers. And I'm always reminded of at least a couple like Chelsea, who was a camper at Camp Quest 20 years ago, our first ever camp, 20 years ago. And then joined the Secular Student Alliance, came back to Camp Quest. She's now a camp director for her local Camp Quest and serves on the board for the National Camp Quest. I also think of Sean Jeffers, who recently was the president of the American Atheist Alliance. So that's pretty cool too. All right. Now here's where you guys come in. Here's how you can help. We're always looking for volunteers. Help us spread the word. If you know people who are out there who don't know about Camp Quest, tell them about Camp Quest. Parents, donors, or people who want to volunteer for us. Help them find us on Facebook, follow us, learn about us. You can help us host fundraisers. You can, as you've done, invite me to come speak. You can spend a week with us at camp, although it's too late for this summer, because we've already done all of our training. We've already got it all worked out. It's only 2 weeks away. Think about it for next year. Again, you can learn about us. You can follow our website, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to our newsletter. We send out one newsletter a month. It's not a big commitment. If it wasn't 2 weeks away, I would say register your kids with us. But it's too late to register because we're all filled up. Those are the dates. It's not too late to donate, though. If you have the capacity and you want to see us continue this mission of providing a safe, secular place for children to learn about the great outdoors and to learn about empathy and the scientific method and to make new friends that don't judge them, then help us grow that campership program. Every donation we get, dollar for dollar, goes right into that campership that parents can apply for next summer. And so that chart's outdated. Ignore that. I should have updated it. We've actually made our goal for this summer, and now I'm working on next year. But I want to read you this letter that was sent to us by a parent last summer who lives in Oakland. And she wrote this to us right after she got home from camp, or her kids got home from camp. She says, Camp Quest West, I would like to say thank you for the financial aid I received. There's no possible way that my kids could have attended without the help. As a single mom and a grad student, I have us on a tight budget, so I write this with tears in my eyes, knowing that your kindness gave my kids such joy. My kids and I have made it through health issues, a divorce, and a move back to California. We may be strong, but it's really through the graciousness of others that we've thrived. Being a secular family, I felt they would have a sense of community and security. They felt cared for, simply as people, no requirement besides being their best selves. I cannot thank you enough for the lessons they learned and the inspiration they now have and the love they felt while they were there. When I'm secure again, I guarantee I will not only be sending my kids, but donating for other families as well. Thank you very much. See you next year. This is from a mother of two who lives in Oakland who received two $375 camperships. And so she ended up paying, I think, about $400 total to send both of the kids. So it does cost us $658 to send a kid to camp. We are a 501c3 organization, so your donations are tax deductible. Now, if you are interested in volunteering, again, it's a little late now to do it, but I'll just give you the basic rundown. What we do for our volunteers is provide them with mandatory training: CPR, first aid, AED, behavior, and a little bit about what we do at Camp Quest. In all, it works out to about 30 hours of training before we allow them to come to Camp Quest. And so for people that are willing to make that commitment, we pay for all the training, including the first aid. What you would have to do is, of course, endure all of that training. There's a full day of training in May, a full day of training in July. There's online videos and the first aid as well. We also create all the activities. We have a curriculum team that works from October through March to write the activities, the team games, the science, and all of that, and the empathy. And if you want to help us on that team, let me know before October, and I'll put you in touch with the curriculum lead. We're always looking for people, especially teachers, who know how to do that kind of stuff. Now, at camp, if you are a volunteer there, there's two kinds of camp counselors. There's the ones that run the cabin and the ones that run the program. Think of the cabin team as the adults who make sure kids get from point A to point B to point C without hurting each other. And the program team are the people that deliver the activities. They're the really super high energy, fun, outgoing, rah, science. And then, of course, our leadership team, our CIT, our LTs, and so on. And so the process is you apply online, we vet you, we do background checks, we run you through the Department of Justice, we call your references, we get you set up with training. If you pass through all that, and an interview, pass through all that, you're good to go. So, that's Camp Quest West. We are fun, friends, and free thought, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to let me be here. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. Looks like there's a mic back there. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, so come to this mic if you have any questions. And I think we'll try to turn it up. Oh, I just have to be very close to the mic. Also, just a note, any donations that we get tonight in our jar is going to go to Camp Quest. So if you want to donate to Camp Quest, you can just do it here. We make it super convenient. Otherwise, if you have any questions, come up to this mic and ask away.
Does anyone have any questions? I don't know if I even needed the microphone. I'm not sure. Yes? I can, yeah, go ahead. I'll repeat your question. I'll repeat it.
Okay, I got a couple of questions. Thanks for coming to speak to the group tonight.
Yeah.
The first question I have is, what percentage of the revenue you bring in is through donations, and what through the payments from the parents?
Sure. So the question was, in terms of our revenue, how much comes from donations and how much comes from the parents paying it in themselves? A couple ways I can answer that. In terms of our overall revenue, last year we received $28,000 in donations and grants. $28,000 in just donations. And everything else was through parents. So that works out percentage-wise. I'm thinking 1 out of 6 on the dollar. What is that, like 15% donation, right around there? Yeah, maybe 18% donation, and the rest is from the parents. Now, another way to look at it, too, is how many parents paid full price as opposed to, or more, because we give them that option. They can pay the full price or more, and about 29 to 30% paid full price or more. 70% did not. And of that 70%, about half took anywhere from $50 to $100 off, and half took more than that off. No parent paid less than $150. We require that every parent have something in the game, and so they have to pay a minimum of $150, and some paid just that, some paid $1,000 more than they needed to.
Okay, and a few other questions.
Sure.
How many kids are at a camp?
In Northern California this year, we have 2 weeks. They'll both have about 64 kids. In Southern California, we have 1 week. It'll have 125 kids.
Okay, wow. And then another question. If you're having one of those programs like a science or geology or something like that program, and a kid brings up something about that's religion related, and they say something like along the lines of, well, I learned such and such at church.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that in a secular type camp?
You know, our core philosophy is to help kids understand how to understand the world around them, to give them the tools to learn themselves. We're not there to teach kids this is how it is. And so even if they were to challenge us on something like evolution or the age of the earth or the existence of God, which doesn't even come up, but if it did, we would ask them, well, what do you think about this and how can you test it, right? How can you determine this? You know, you may not think that dinosaurs went extinct long before man came around, or you may think that they were together, whatever. How can we use our tools and our knowledge with the evidence that we have to come to some conclusions, right? And so that's why we champion the scientific method. What we're not there to do is just pass on scientific dogma, if you will, right? And you know, some of our kids are not atheists. I mean, it's hard for me to call any kid an atheist anyway, because they have not, many of them haven't really thought about it for themselves. They come from secular backgrounds or religious ones. We have kids that self-identify as Christian. They're probably very liberal Christian, but they're Christian. Maybe their parents are of a mixed background. Maybe mom is an atheist and dad is Catholic, or vice versa. Maybe they came because their best friend brought them with them. And so, you know, whatever the reason is, we're very careful. We don't want kids to feel any more bullied for not being an atheist than you or I have been bullied because we were an atheist. Does that kind of make sense? And so we just champion the scientific method. We champion the idea that they can discover this themselves and use these tools to learn about the world around them.
And one other question, since you... Oh, sure, absolutely.
We can come back to you.
Thank you. I was wondering if you know approximately what percentage of the kids will return after each year?
Yeah, we study the return rate of our campers each year. I don't have the exact numbers in my head, but if I remember correctly, it's somewhere around 60 to 70% come back each year. And it may sound like a low number, but we also realize that many of them age out of camp, some of them move away from camp, and some of them just have other things come up. So for example, this year, I know that there's at least 7 campers who aren't coming back because we filled up and their parents didn't register them fast enough. That's sad. That's really sad. Not a lot we can do about that, except maybe plan for more growth. But I also know that, you know, a couple of people that we talked to, we asked, you know, hey, are you coming back this year? They said, no, the kid has summer school. Or the kid goes to a different camp each year, you know. There's custody issues. Mom sent him to camp, but dad's Catholic and wants him to send him to a different camp this year. So, but we do ask, you know, did you come back? Is this a return time, first time kind of thing? And about 60% or so, year after year, come back to us. But there's always some that just don't come back because it didn't work out. We don't hear very often at all that they didn't come back because they didn't feel comfortable, they didn't like it, they didn't make friends. We ask that, and we've never had that issue come up. Yeah.
Kind of the same question, but how about your volunteer return rate?
Yeah, well, volunteers, it's kind of the same thing. This year we have, I think, like an 80% return rate on the volunteers. But, you know, the majority of our volunteers are college students and teachers. They both happen to have summers off for the most part. Teachers come back to us year after year. Retirees come back to us. College students, it's a little more difficult because what do college students eventually do? They finish college, they graduate, hopefully they get a job, and then they don't come back to camp. We would love it if they did, and they would love to come back to camp. But the reality of it is, if we get a really great college student, we're probably only going to have them for 1 or 2 years.
Hi, I don't really have a question, just more of a comment and hopefully some words of encouragement. Back in 2012, before I moved out here on the other side of the country, I volunteered for the inaugural year of Camp Quest New England, and it was a fabulous experience. So I would really encourage, this is before I had kids, it's a really incredible way to get involved with the little ones. And in my case, they needed a lifeguard. I said, I'm a great swimmer. I paid the money. I got certified by the Red Cross and all this stuff, and was the lifeguard for the camp. So by all means, if you feel like you don't want to give money, maybe you can volunteer instead.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that. I'm curious if you remember do you remember who your camp director was, or any of the people that were running it?
Yeah, at the time it was a guy named Jason Diebel, who was indeed a school teacher.
Okay.
And then his family grew by another one, and he had to drop being the director. And then I moved out here at the end of that summer, so I could not be involved in it again. So
Right.
I know they ran it again. I can't remember. I know there's a Brian Winkler and a Daisy and a couple other
Stacy's
fine
still
folks out
involved.
there.
Yeah, that's so cool. And you're welcome back at ours anytime. Yeah, thank you.
So my question is, how do most parents find out about Camp Quest?
How do parents find out about Camp Quest? A lot of it is word of mouth. We do put a little bit of money into Facebook, about maybe $200 or $300 a year. But for the most part, they're finding out because their friends go and they go to meet up and they talk to, parents talk. They might find out about us at different conferences and events. Generally, whenever there's an opportunity for us to table at some kind of event like Skeptical, we will be there. If there's a large conference especially. So that's probably the number one way, is through word of mouth. I guess that's two ways, word of mouth and us tabling. Facebook is also great, but the reality is we just don't spend a lot of money on marketing. Yeah.
All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. You guys have any more questions, or you want to talk to Dave? He will be here, I'm assuming, for a little while. Otherwise, yeah, thank you all for coming. It's a small event, but sometimes we need these.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I will hang out over there by our table. We've got literature. Our annual report is back there. If you want to learn more about us, there's a little form. You can give me your contact information. I'll follow up with an email, phone, or text. And feel free to grab a brochure and chat with me. I've got a business card up there too. Thank you so much for having me.